Introductions in video games are one of the most important elements of the experience. They need to set up any narrative stakes and why you should care about the characters. They have to show you what the game is about while giving you enough mechanical depth to be engaging, and while still holding some back so the game can expand as you progress. They also have to teach you how to play, without bogging everything down with slow or infantilizing tutorialization. Many games succeed in all three areas. Others fail in one or more, for a multitude of reasons. Some intros in particular demand a strange amount of perfection from their players. Today, let's explore a handful of introductions that quickly push players far more than their peers, and far more than you'd expect when first booting them up. Some of them work in spite of this quirk. Some of them don't, and I think that's what makes them interesting. I also have a guest with me today, so say hello to BenDoesStuff. Each of us picked 3 games to explore with this video, and then, if you still want more, we've got another collaboration on his channel which reflects on the different values inherent in single-player and multiplayer experiences, and how these experiences can sometimes cross over. So before Ben shows me up with his charisma and fancy edits, let's jump in with the first example of a game intro that demands perfection. The first example I wanted to look at is an obvious one, which sparked this entire video idea. I'm a bit late to playing Resident Evil 4 Remake, but I finally got my hands on it a few months ago. Well, a lot of things changed between this version and the original. Some things stayed the same. One of those things is the first major encounter the game pits the player against, the village fight. In both versions of Resident Evil 4, there are about 10 minutes of light tutorial encounters to tiptoe through while you get used to the most basic controls. A Ganado here, another Ganado there, a few different weapon types to get used to. It teaches you about basic aiming, shooting, and looting, almost giving the impression that it's going to play like a behind-the-back version of classic RE titles. To the surprise of basically everyone in 2005, this is not the case, and the village fight is here to set the new tone. Now, the villagers don't initially attack Leon. You have to get pretty close before they'll notice you, but you can go around to the side in order to delay the inevitable a bit. The player might even assume their goal is to get by without being noticed, or that the whole group won't pick up on your presence as long as you isolate stragglers and take them out individually. Then you fire your first shot, almost certainly at this enemy here, and all hell breaks loose. Leon's death is the last space each of them needs to call bingo, and they're going to do everything in their power to mark you first. To make matters worse, depending on where you go and what you do, it's possible to get 2 special enemies on you, both of them chainsaw-wielding madmen who will one-shot you if you get too close to their wild swings. This fight either demands that you wait it out for several minutes, or you defeat a certain amount of Ganados before the church bell will ring and everybody suddenly forgets you exist and scampers away. But in either case, it will feel like you have dozens of enemies on you at all times. Particularly considering this type of over-the-shoulder combat was fairly new in 2005, and the fact that the original game still used tank controls, it took me and a friend of mine probably a dozen attempts or more to beat this one encounter as teenagers, and yet because the gameplay was so frantic and fun, we persevered. Meanwhile, I've done this fight probably at least 50 times since then, and yet I'm not afraid to admit that when it came to the demo for the remake, I still died once or twice more. The enemies in the remake are more aggressive to account for Leon having freer movement controls, and the new parry option with his knife that blocks attacks and staggers enemies. Despite the challenge here, the player gets access to several healing items, a shotgun, and grenades to survive. Ganados also don't all try to massacre our boy simultaneously, and in the original game in particular, they'll slow way down and become less aggressive once they get to within a certain distance of you. Not to mention the game's adaptive difficulty system will make them further docile, and they'll do less damage and have less health if you keep failing. I think the reason this particular example works so well is that it gives you all the tools you need to succeed without feeling like you're overpowered. Pair that with adaptive difficulty that won't actively highlight that it's getting easier on you, as well as just enough enemy aggression and resource management to keep things tense, and beating this encounter feels like it's entirely down to you getting good enough at the challenges it requests of you. Beating the village fight feels wonderful, even on your 50th playthrough. And while you don't know it on your first playthrough, if you can accomplish this, then the game is quietly confirming that you can handle whatever the rest of it throws at you.
Star Wars Empire at War is a tough game. Well, about as tough as an RTS can get. I personally don't have a ton of experience within the genre, but it's Star Wars, come on. How bad could it be? For a guy like me, pretty bad. I didn't grow up with StarCraft or Age of Empires or Command & Conquer or Crusader Kings or Total War. The most I've played was LEGO Battles on the DS, and way before that, the classic LEGO.com Mars Mission RTS known as Crystalian Conflict, which you can still play today. Thank you, modders. Those two games are very well made and very fun to play, even if they are for children. I can remember spending hours on LEGO.com trying to complete both the human and the alien sides of the story, and when LEGO Battles came out, it was like being reunited with an old friend. But this isn't about old friends. This is about even older friends. While LEGO Battles released in 2009 and Crystalian Conflict released in 2007, Star Wars Empire at War released in 2006, and I didn't play it until 2017. I got this. I know how this style of game works, okay? Step 1, build buildings. Step 2, build units. Step 2.5, amass an army. Step 4, send them all to the enemy base. Step 5, profit. Huh. All my units are dead. And now I gotta beat the level with just Darth Vader and 2 squadrons of stormtroopers. This isn't how the game is supposed to work. Empire at War takes itself very seriously. This is the Galactic Civil War. The game is rated T for try harder, son. You gotta use strategy. You can't just make a ton of units and Zerg rush all the time. You gotta think. You gotta plan. You gotta do a bunch of stuff that my tiny brain just isn't able to do. There are many layers to this game too. I mean, look at all these tutorials. What, am I trying to write my dissertation on managing a war? It takes about an hour or so to get through them all, but good luck effectively using everything you learned. There are a couple modes, such as Galactic Conquest, which is a storyless campaign where the goal is to control the galaxy or eliminate the enemy faction's leader, and Skirmish, which is just an individual ground or space battle that you can customize. But it's likely that after you finish the tutorial, if you even played them at all, you'll jump right into the main campaign. There'll be a brief tutorial-esque level, and then you're thrown right into the thick of it. There are 2 phases of sorts. There's the overall galactic map where you can see planets, who occupies them, their hyperspace lanes, and any friendly fleets above them. Then there's the planet side view, where you can see what buildings are built and what units are stationed there. This only applies to friendly planets. Attackers will have to break through the space fleet in order to get planet side, so you'll need a ton of units to attack in space, to protect your ground unit transports, and then an invasion force. It's just one battle after another, which I suppose is the point, but this game's gameplay loop has very little room for rest, and I feel like I'm constantly running at 100% with no real understanding of what I'm doing. Sure, there's objectives and a story that kind of guides your actions, but ultimately there isn't much explained to you in regards to what you actually need to beat each level, aside from the rare occasions where they actually make you use a specific unit. So you end up dropping a bunch of random units into a mission totally unprepared for what's about to happen until you lose because you had no idea what you were up against. Then you gotta rebuild your army, which takes time and credits to do. Hope you also built up some planetary defenses in the meantime, because the enemy fleet can and will attack you during this phase. And they work fast. It's a little unfair how the AI can just do everything instantly, and I have to stumble around looking at my planets and all my resources and take 10 minutes just to make a decision. It really puts the player at a disadvantage. I understand that the idea is to simulate an accurate war scenario within Star Wars and to satisfy those who love the RTS genre. The whole point is that you gotta be quick and smart. You gotta strategize and plan ahead. You need to ascend to Grand Admiral Thrawn Galaxy Brain status in order to win. And while it's totally possible to brute force your way to victory by throwing every unit you have at the enemy, the game makes sure that this is a very inefficient and ineffective strategy. The game has a ton of different units that you can build, and each one has their own strengths and weaknesses against other units, which you can see here when you hover over them. This is good to know, but now I need to make sure that when I'm in a fight, that the proper units are attacking what they're strong against and avoiding what they're weak against. Then most units have a special ability, which you need to manually activate in order to get the most out of your encounters. Sometimes the mission requires you to do this to complete an objective. There is just so much to micromanage that it's going to be overwhelming for your average player, which is me. I'm average. Maybe I'm just bad at RTSs, but I find this game to be pretty challenging and mentally exhausting. I have yet to get very far in the campaign, and after an hour or so of playing, I'm just tired. It's possible that this is just a baby game to lovers of the genre, especially if you look at some of the mods, which increase the difficulty tenfold. But even though it's Star Wars, I just can't seem to stick to it. Screw this, I'm going back to LEGO Battles.
Changing gears for a second, we have Driver, You Are the Wheelman for the PlayStation 1. This is considered the progenitor of the Grand Theft Auto open-world crime game, and is well loved for it. As the name suggests, Driver focuses on, well, driving. Go figure. Driver sold extremely well back when it was new, but it's also notorious for immediately putting up a wall that left many players unable to progress more than a minute into the story mode. No, literally, just a single minute. While plenty of games, even at the time, start with tutorials, Drivers is a bit unique. It serves as an in-universe test for your main character, Tanner, who is an undercover cop trying to earn his way into becoming a getaway driver in the criminal underworld. This means the player is supposed to finish a checklist of objectives in a small parking garage, under a strict time limit to prove they can hang with the big dogs. If you bump into more than 3 things along the way, you're out. Game over, try again. That sounds easy enough on paper. It's when you actually try it yourself that you realize, unless you're a car person already, this is going to be a bit of an uphill battle. Firstly, the list of objectives isn't explained at all in the mission. It's safe to assume a 90s kid probably knew what a burnout was, and what 180, 360, speed, and brake test meant. Lap is also pretty self-explanatory once you realize there's an outer area of the garage that is really the only place to do a lap. Also, to accomplish some of the tasks, you'll have to press the handbrake button at some point, and that'll get you handbrake. That's a lot done already, so what's the big deal? Well, finishing some of these tasks still isn't going to be perfectly straightforward. To do a burnout, you have to play around and learn that the game has a dedicated burnout button, and you'll then have to experiment enough to realize the only way to do a 360 is with said burnout button. Meanwhile, brake test requires getting to very nearly the highest speed you can, and then slamming on the brakes, making use of as much space in the garage as you have. You are testing your braking capabilities, not granny stopping at a stop sign. But a new player won't know that. From here, things can get much more difficult if you don't know what's being asked of you. A reverse 180 is probably the easier of the 2 remaining tasks. I know plenty of people who initially thought it meant to just do a 180 in the opposite direction, but once you try that and it doesn't work, the only logical choice left is the right answer. Start driving in reverse and then spin the car around. What might be a bit deceptive here for some is that you don't need the handbrake for this, and it'll actually make the task more difficult if you try to use it. Good luck not hitting anything your first couple of tries, by the way. No, it's slalom that trips most people up. Consistently, when I hear people complain about this tutorial, it's because they don't even know what a slalom is. What the game is asking you to do is weave in and out of the pillars on one side of the garage. However, just that won't cross the objective off, because you have to turn around the final pillar and do it back the other way as well, all while not hitting any cars parked in the area. Okay, so once you know how to do all these tasks, you're good, right? Just memorize what's being asked of you and do it. Well, not quite, because there's one more elephant in the room beyond the fact that the timer is relatively strict. The physics. Driver was renowned at the time for its shockingly realistic physics. Driver is also a callback to old-school driving and action movies, back when fast cars couldn't put their power to the ground and had suspensions that rocked like a boat in a storm. Driver mimics this about as faithfully as you could imagine on a PlayStation 1, making these cars a bit of a handful. So, if you want to accomplish this task and play this game beyond the tutorial, you should probably get good first. Thankfully, the game has other content on offer that can help you learn, including a section where you can watch a replay of someone completing this very mission, but a lot of people gave up before they got there. While still a tutorial, this section of Driver, similar to the village fight in RE4, is also a test to make sure you're good enough to beat the rest of the game. Unlike RE4, however, Driver is not throwing one of its hardest sections at you here. While some missions in this game are so easy that even those who haven't played the tutorial could do them, others are hair-pullingly difficult. Seems like the developers wanted you to know that going in.
Helldivers 2 is the new hotness. If you're not playing Helldivers, where the hell are you? The bots are on the move, the bugs are further than they've ever been, and the Illumina invasion fleet is here. The galaxy needs managed democracy to be free. Super Earth is in danger. I need to be down there, but instead I'm up here recording this crap. Nobody wants to hear me talk. That's way more important. There's already a ton of content covering Helldivers 2, so I won't go too deep into it, but I think you can ask any level 1 newbie or level 150 veteran, and they'll tell you remarkably similar stories about their introductions to the game. The intro to the game itself isn't incredibly difficult, especially since you can choose a level of difficulty to play on, and you have to start at level 1 and work your way up to level 10. However, it's the hazing, trial by fire method of playing with your friends that really sets you up to have a bad time. I feel like it's a universal Helldiver experience to start the tutorial and then get to this point and immediately die to the turrets. And then keep dying to the turrets. Like a lot. Like an embarrassing amount of times. 'Cause we're stupid. I genuinely wonder how many potential Helldivers we've lost to these turrets alone. I guess they just weren't fit for duty. Then once you complete the tutorial and earn your cape, you get a Super Earth destroyer of your own, which you are immediately ripped from to join your best friend who's had the game since launch. And he takes you on your first super hell dive to initiate you to the true hells that we dive into daily. Armed with only the default loadout and an extremely loose grip on the controls, you will die. A lot. Oh my gosh! Ah! Hell, even on lower difficulties, you'll die a lot too. You get a chance to learn how to use your weapons and how to complete objectives without much threat from enemies on lower levels. But if you aren't careful, the few enemies you encounter can overwhelm a new player and kill them. I'm frankly embarrassed to admit how many times I've died to level 1 enemies while grinding for super credits. All you have to do to earn the ability to play on a higher difficulty is to beat one operation, which is 3 missions of varying objectives, at the current highest difficulty you have unlocked. It's quite possible to continually play higher and higher difficulty levels faster than you can level up and unlock better stratagems if you're increasing the difficulty each time you unlock one. And depending on who you ask, each one of the 3 enemy factions has the potential to be the most difficult one to fight against. You've got the bugs, the bots, and the squids, otherwise known as the Terminids, automatons, and the Illuminate. The bugs are all about overwhelming numbers. Most of the bugs have the ability to call in reinforcements, and when they come in huge hordes. They're mostly melee units with a few exceptions, so if you don't have the right kit, you'll be minced bug food before you can shout, "Sweet liberty, my leg!" The automatons also come in large numbers, but their main method of oppression is overwhelming firepower. Nearly every bot shoots at you, again, with a few exceptions, whether it's a small sidearm or a devastating cannon turret. The secret to fighting these undemocratic toasters is the 3 C's: cover, courage, and more cover. Seriously, don't stand in one place for too long or a bunker turret's gonna blow you away without warning. Finally, there's the Illuminate, the zombies mode of Helldivers. Super tough enemies with insta-kill laser weapons, shields, and hordes upon hordes of voteless chaff. I honestly still don't know how to beat these sushi rolls. I think they're the most difficult faction personally. Of course, that's not even considering the most deadly enemy of all: your teammates. What's funnier than taking a level 1 cadet to a super helldive mission? Telling him to stand in the bright blue light as a resupply lands. Suggesting swimming across the river to get to the objective faster. Staying silent while you watch him run past your machine gun sentry without crouching. Simply capping the poor soul for no reason. We as Helldivers are always the most dangerous thing on any battlefield. And too often will we democratically sacrifice each other through misjudging an eagle strike, running into an orbital barrage thoughtlessly, or simply firing into a crowd which contains one of our fellow Helldivers. Friendly fire is common and very hilarious, and you will likely die more to your teammates than the enemies themselves. Now, I don't want to encourage toxic behavior because that makes people stop playing, and we need all the help we can get. We are losing the war. But all of these things and more are exactly what happened to me and what happens to many, many others all the time. But especially when you're playing with friends. Don't do this with randos, please. They aren't able to laugh about it with you, and they will not have a good time. Helldivers 2 does not have a difficult intro, but it's the immediate hazing ritual that many, many Helldivers have gone through that truly displays the highest difficulty you will encounter. And once you've seen the worst of it all, the rest doesn't seem too bad. And so those who were told to run to the center of an orbital barrage continue the tradition to those who come after them, on and on as we add more and more divers to our ranks. And that's a beautiful thing. May liberty guide you to ultimate victory.
You have been accused of treason by the Super Earth Ministry of Truth for spreading false rumors about the state of the galactic war. You have been sentenced to our re-education camps. Do not resist.
Wait, no, I'm
Wait, that's because I said we're losing?
The last game of mine is the most peculiar of my examples, because in this case, the difficulty comes from a mechanic's design. It isn't hard due to high dexterity requirements or necessary knowledge, and it actually gets easier after the first chunk of gameplay. The intro to The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind can be a nightmare for many people, all because of a little hidden stat called hit rate. You see, despite Morrowind playing like an action game, where the player is completely free to run around in 3D space in any way they wish, and where the distance to a target can literally mean you're out of reach of others' attack range, Bethesda still decided to treat the experience more like a traditional RPG, where accuracy isn't based on where you're aiming, but rather on dice rolls under the hood. Every time you attack in Morrowind, the game uses several underlying stats to come up with a percentage chance that the attack will connect, otherwise known as your current hit rate. It then rolls to see if you land on that percentage and the attack connects, or you land outside of it where the attack will miss. Even if you're standing directly in front of a massive target, swinging away while neither of you moves an inch. Factors that affect hit rate include how full your fatigue bar is, whether or not you have the blind status, which is actually bugged to raise your hit rate instead of lowering it, your agility and luck stats, the evasive abilities of the enemy you're trying to hit, and most importantly, your proficiency with that weapon type. If you have full fatigue, you'll gain an additional 25% hit rate. If you are out of it, you'll get 25% less. As far as I understand it, the rest of the time, fatigue has no effect. Agility and luck also have a somewhat minor effect. What this means is that if you pick the wrong character class setup for the type of weapons you're going to find in the early game, or you switch weapon types at any point, you're going to miss far more attacks than you hit, and you'll have no idea why. To my knowledge, the game never adequately explains any of how this works to you. It does mean that if you keep to one weapon type, you'll slowly see the problem become a non-issue, but any deviation or choosing a bad starting class setup can make hours of your playthrough a chance-based nightmare. Unlike Oblivion or Skyrim, which would come afterward, Morrowind does not scale enemies to the player. So while you'll find some of the small critters outside to be tedious to fight but manageable, it's extremely easy to run across humanoid enemies or larger animals and monsters that can wreck you, even if you're stronger than them, purely by way of getting bad rolls on hit rate. The thing is though, if you pick a class that happens to start with a high short blade skill or something, or maybe pick up the warrior as your birth sign, you might not see this problem at all until you try to switch weapon types. The dagger the tutorial asks you to pick up, as well as the nearly unmissable sword Tarheel offers after he falls from the sky near the start and you loot his corpse, are both governed by short blades. I'm sure there are also a couple of other weapon types nearby you can pilfer if your class has different weapons as their starting preference, but otherwise, you're on your own with a system that you're only vaguely going to get an understanding of by just playing the game. Without knowledge of how to deal with this design element in Morrowind, or without a mod that can change it, it's very easy for the early game to feel like a steep uphill battle that punishes players for not waiting around in the kiddie pool killing bugs for ages. And it's even worse if you're unlucky enough to have been one of the people playing on the original Xbox version, which had loading times in the several minutes range after you die. Once you know how to handle hit rate, it becomes almost bearable, especially if you attack slowly, letting your fatigue fill all the way back up after each attack. It's tedious, and entirely counter to the action-oriented combat design and movement though, not to mention characters in Morrowind start so slow that within 5 minutes most players will want to spam the run button while exploring, almost guaranteeing they'll never get the fatigue bonus. Without mods, it will never not be frustrating and look silly as hell to watch your character flail around within kissing distance of their enemy and only hit with 1 out of every 10 attacks.
Hey everyone. Everything is fine. The Ministry of Truth only has the best intentions and keeps all enemy propaganda in check. In their mighty benevolence, they actually gave me a promotion. I am now the captain of my own starship, and we have a mission to bring critical information to another fleet on the other side of the galaxy. Not too bad. Can't be worse than being a Helldiver. FTL, short for Faster Than Light, is a little fun roguelite where you command a starship as you travel across different sectors to bring information to the Federation on the other side of the galaxy. The information you carry has the capacity to turn the tide in the war and defeat the rebel fleet. Sounds important. Perfect for a re-educated man like me. You start with a ship, a crew, and 8 sectors between you and your objective. You can also pick from a small selection of ships, and later unlock new ones by beating the final boss or completing certain objectives. My favorite part is that you can customize your ship name and crew. A small touch, but one that makes you feel just a bit worse when one of your crewmates gets bludgeoned to death by a rock man. This is my crew. Beef, Crunf, and Boot. While you make your way across the galaxy, you can explore and gather scrap to improve your ship, and maybe fight the spare pirate or automated drone. Unfortunately, the entire rebel fleet is pursuing you as you make the journey, so you can't spend too long in each sector. Yikes, they really want whatever you're carrying. As you travel, you hit different jump points where random events occur. You can encounter friends, enemies, merchants, distress signals, nebulas, asteroid belts, solar flares, and more. Once you reach the exit beacon, you can choose which sector you want to travel to next. This can range from civilian, nebula, or hostile sectors, and there are many different reasons why you would want to pick one over the other, but I won't get into that here. FTL is notoriously difficult for everyone who plays it, even on easy mode. But what is it that makes it so difficult? This. FTL is all about management. You've got crew members, power, weapons, engines, shields, hull strength, fuel, missiles, drones, and many, many more tiny details to consider when fighting enemies and exploring the galaxy. You may assume that this game looks simple on the surface, but you know what they say about assuming things? Don't. FTL features a quick tutorial that makes sure you know the controls, such as moving your crew members and shooting at enemy ships, and then it's all uphill from there. This game has an incredibly sharp learning curve. While the tutorial teaches you basic things like firing your missiles to disable the enemy shields so your lasers can get through, it fails to mention that this game hates you and your entire family and wishes you were dead. Twice. It's so incredibly easy to become overwhelmed by a single enemy, especially if the player came to the battle unprepared or just had a stroke of equally incredibly bad luck. Hull breaches, fires, boarding parties, and more plague you throughout your journey. These things are not too difficult to handle on their own. Just send a crewmate to patch a hole, put out the fire, or fight the intruders. The only problem is, these things all tend to happen at once. The environment is trying to kill you too. Sometimes you'll encounter a battle that has an environmental hazard on top of it. Nebulas that obscure your vision, solar flares that set fire to your interior, asteroids that damage your hull and cause breaches, ion storms that temporarily disable systems and lower your reactor power? It's a huge mess, and one that will quickly bring an end to any captain with decision paralysis. Fortunately, you do have a pause button, but that only delays the inevitable. The worst is when you know there's nothing you can do and you have to face your end with rage, because if my missiles would just hit their target, no wonder they're called missiles, because they miss all the freaking time. All it takes is one bad series of events to ruin your whole run. You could run out of one of your critical resources like drones, fuel, or missiles. You could have a random event not go your way and take damage. You could lose a crewmate to a whole slew of different things. You could make a poor decision with your scrap and not have what you need later on. You could have the perfect storm of environmental hazard, unlucky accuracy, and enemy strength that stops your run within the first sector. What's strange about this game is that despite only ever beating the final boss twice, which is another level of near impossible BS, I still love this game and know many others do too. You can look on YouTube and find multiple hour-long videos on tactics and best practices just to merely increase your odds of winning. It's crazy. I have come to terms with never unlocking all the ships or winning the game ever again. Despite the odds, I always gave it my best, and a good captain always goes down with the ship.
So those are a handful of game introductions that require perfection. If you can think of any more, drop them in the comments and maybe this could become a series. I've got plenty of other examples ready if there's interest in more. Thanks for watching, check out our other collaboration on Ben's channel, and we'll see you next time.